Welcome to the Mind Advantage, Winning Strategies with Dr. Joe. I am Dr. Joe, and in this video series, I like to bring together short videos that offer you a really practical tip or piece of learning that you can apply in your life that will help to elevate your performance and help get you closer to the goals that you set for yourself. So for this week's video, and this one for me is a really important one to start with for video number one, because I think that if we can apply this piece of information that I'm sharing with you today, then it actually helps to elevate and get the most out of all the learning that will be in all of the videos that I drop into either my YouTube channel, if that's where you're watching this, or in my Facebook group, Winning Strategies. A video will appear each week, but to get the most out of each video, the first thing that we all need to do is to apply this first learning principle. So I wanted to share that with you. This is something that I learned in my career a very long time ago. So just as a bit of a backstory, when I went through high school, thankfully I only did it once. When I went through high school, I was a pretty diligent worker. I worked very hard and had to work fairly hard for all of the marks that I got. One of the subjects that I really struggled in was in maths. And somehow I'd found myself in an advanced maths class, but I wasn't particularly shining, shall we say, in terms of my results. So I actually ended up at the end of high school failing maths one. And that was despite the fact that I had a tutor at the time. So I don't know quite what that says for my learning and for my results. So I struggled with maths. And I know I was often felt challenged that I would, define myself by that and say things to myself back before I knew about a performance mindset about the fact that I wasn't very good at maths. I don't have a maths brain and so forth. So that was kind of how my high school journey finished. And I put myself into a pathway for a career in psychology. Went through psychology, realised with shock and horror in my second year, like many students do, that there is a very strong research and statistics component to the psychology degree and to psychological practice. If we can't consume research and look at it and look at the numbers, make a decision about it, then we really don't know which of the learnings and the research that we should be paying attention to and helping clients with, and which ones we should be disregarding. So it made sense once I got there, but it certainly wasn't why I went into psychology to revisit my favourite old subject, statistics. Got myself through it in second year, graduated at the end of my fourth year, and then found myself with a teaching position at the university. So in my first year of teaching, I taught in a first year psychology subject, and at the end of the year, the professor took me into his office and said, "Joe, what teaching would you like to do next year?" And I said, "Well, I've done first year, so I'd like to do that again because I really feel like I've got a handle on that now. And I really don't mind what other subjects that I teach in. The only request that I would have is probably not research design and statistics, because I still had some of those residual effects of high school where I didn't think that it was my skill set at all." Now, for whatever reason, and whether it was the head of school forgot or that let's just say that maybe he forgot, didn't write those notes down. But anyway, I found myself, of course, teaching research design and statistics. And I can't tell you how anxious I was going into that. So that part of the story is really relevant to this learning principle that I want to share with you today. What I want to do is help you to see some of the ways in which we learn and how to actually get the most benefit from the learnings and the teachings that are in front of us. So with this video here, how can you get the most out of it? Because otherwise, I think what can sometimes happen, there's so many resources online that we can watch and trainings and educations, but depending upon how we consume that information really influences how far we take it beyond the moment of just watching it. If you just want to watch stuff, find it interesting and move on, then that's probably all that you need to do. But if you don't, then this becomes really helpful. So I've brought together a pyramid, a pyramid of learning that I've adapted from the NTL Institute of Applied Behavioural Sciences. It's their learning pyramid. So they were the first ones that came together with this. But what they suggest through the research is the different ways that people learn and what's most effective and what's least effective. So the caveat I would put in front of this, though, is that humans do tend to have learning preferences. What do we mean by that? It means that if I was to say to you, hey, I've bought you a new camera, aren't you lucky? And you have never used that camera before and you want to learn how to use that camera. What would be the first way you would try to teach it to yourself? Now, for some people, they might jump online and watch a video. Some people might ask someone they know who has the same camera and get them to tell them how to use it. Some people would pull out the manual, and some people would just plug it in and play around with it until they found that it worked. So those 4 different styles, and maybe you might even do a combination of those, represent the 4 different types of learning styles. So some people tend to lean more towards the visuals, some more towards what they're told, some like to read and to write, and some people engage in what we call movement, or what's often referred to as kinesthetic. So if you take those 4 letters there, V, A, R, and K, you get the acronym which is known as VARK. So some people have a preference. So the reason I'm telling you that is that your version of this pyramid might be a little bit different. I may say some things that don't sit consistently for you, but what I'm going to tell you is what the general research tells us, and then what we want to do is think about how that best applies to you. What we know is that if you try to consume information solely through a lecture, so what that means is that I'm sitting back, maybe in an auditorium, or maybe it's just you and I, and you are simply telling me the information. I don't have a notepad. I'm not recording it in any way. We're not having a discussion about it. You're simply lecturing to me. That's generally regarded as one of the least effective ways to consume information. Now, students, particularly university students, soon learn this, and so they do tend to bring in other modalities into a learning environment. I know for me as a university student, this would be the worst way for me to learn any information. I would have to bring, because I'm very much a written learner, I would have to bring in a notepad with me to take notes. I would need to ask questions. I'd need to engage with colleagues and find other ways to learn. So, but the pure sitting and being lectured to is generally not considered to be a particularly effective way of learning and taking the knowledge moving forward. Then we come to reading. Now, I'm a big fan of reading, obviously, as someone who does lots of reading and has written a couple of books as well. So this, sadly, is not necessarily the best way to retain information and then to take it further. Now, for those of you who are avid written learners, you might be going, or reading learners, you might be saying, well, hang on a sec, that doesn't fit for me. But by and large, reading and just taking in the information without doing something else with it is generally also considered to be a fairly passive way of learning. And so it doesn't necessarily get you to where it is that you want to be. Then we get ourselves to, I've gone too ahead there. Let's go back one. Then we go to the audio visual. So this is where, we find that people generally, this is a generalization, but will generally retain about 20% of information if they see it and they hear it. So a video is a good example. So for example, this video, if you simply watched it and didn't write any notes and didn't watch it again afterwards and didn't do any of the other things I'm about to suggest to you that sit north of this part of the pyramid, then typically about 20% of the content that I present to you would be things that you might potentially remember. That's not going to hold for everyone, but that's roughly what we see and how it is. So we know that as computer technology develops, this changes, but by and large, it's better than reading and it's better than lectures, but it certainly doesn't get us the maximum benefit from learning something. Then we have, and now we start to move from, lectures, reading, audio, visual are fairly passive in that we are receiving information. When we get involved with a demonstration where we actually see the task being taught, what will often happen for people is there'll also be a visualization process that happens for people. There might even be a little bit of subtle movement that someone does as they're watching someone do it. So it is considered to be a more active way of learning. Not the most active, but certainly more active. So if we demonstrate it, particularly I know if I was describing to someone how to fix something, I think I would do a better job of teaching someone if I showed them rather than I simply told them how to do it. Because what happens is when we're telling someone how to do something, we are forming pictures in our mind, but the person who's on the receiving end doesn't have the benefit of those pictures. They're creating their own based purely on your words. So demonstrating things is another great way to go. And then to add into that is discussion. And this is hopefully what we see particularly in our learning environments, because what a discussion does is it's an interactive way of sharing information. It puts us at a more equal playing field, I guess, in terms of the learning, in terms of the knowledge. So discussion allows us to include conversation around where our gaps are, and it deepens our understanding. Then we have practice doing. So if it's a doable thing, so we might have a go at doing it ourselves and we might practice that. So you can see from my pyramid here that there's probably looks like there should be one more thing at the top. And that's going to be the key point and the key message from today's video. So there's no doubt in the videos that I'm going to be loading up in the coming weeks and months that there'll be a whole range of topics there that you might watch it. You might go, oh, that's a good idea. I'm going to do that. And maybe you might try and practice it, or you might, listen to a podcast about it to find out a little bit more. You might talk to someone else about it. You might practice it yourself. But here it is. And this is, if we go back to my story of teaching second year statistics way back in the early 90s when I did it, is that I was quite anxious about doing that, because remember, I had built up a belief system for myself that mathematics was not my strong point. And here I was about to teach 220 students in the topic that I felt least confident in. And what that process did for me, the gift that it gave me at the time, although I didn't quite see it at the time, but I can see it now, is it forced me to learn the material in a way that not only did I understand it, but I could teach it to others. And this is the key way to really get the most benefit from anything that you are learning or anything that you are trying to implement for yourself. Teach somebody else. Explain it to somebody else. Teach somebody else. Convey the meaning of what it is that you're doing. Now, I'm going to tell you that first year that I taught that stats subject, I was literally 7 days in front of the students. I would get out of the lecture, catch my breath, and then scramble like a duck on water, making sure that I was remotely competent enough to go in the next week. And I also got very good at, when students would ask me questions that I didn't know the answer to, of first saying, that's a very good question, and saying to them, I want to do a little bit more research around that, or I want to explain that to you in a particular way. I'm going to come back to you tomorrow, or I'll see you next week, and we'll go through that. One of the things that I like to do if I'm teaching a concept, whether that be to an individual or to a group or even to a large audience, is I often like to provide resources when I'm presenting. So, for example, this is just a little card that I use in some of my presentations when I'm talking about the difference between responding and reacting. So it's like a little takeaway people can take with them, with the background of the learning, to help to remind them. But what I like to do, particularly when I've got enough resources with me, is not simply give them one resource, but to actually give them two. And the reason that I do that is because of the importance of what I know will help reinforce the learning for someone. And that is that if you know a concept, one of the best ways to anchor it for yourself is to teach it to somebody else. And so what you can do is you give someone the two resources, and then I say, what I want you to do now is to go away to someone that you trust, and I want you to teach this concept to them. So I would even say the same for you with this video that we've talked about today, is that I've taken you through the 7 stages of how we can learn information and how we can integrate it. And what I've hopefully built for you is an understanding that we go from the more passive ways of learning. And those passive ways are, as we say, all the way from the lecture all the way through to something more active, which is where you're actually teaching it to someone else. And even if you don't feel like an expert, practicing it is a really great way to integrate it, not only for the person that you're gifting it to, but also to integrate your own learning as well. So what I would suggest to you is below, either if you're on the Facebook page, it should be in the first comment, or if you're on the YouTube link, there'll be a link there in the description of this final slide. So this final slide shows the adaptation from the behavioural sciences learning pyramid, about the different ways that people learn. And what I'd really encourage you to do if you want to maximise your learning is to show this to someone on your phone, or to print it off, or to share it with someone. The more you share it, the better. And to actually explain to them the different styles of learning. So what you'll be doing is talking about the different styles of learning, talking about how we go from more passive methods to more active methods, that of course sometimes there is some more variability in terms of how we learn. So the pyramid as it sits here may not be entirely what it is to you, but it won't be far away from it. And then you teach that to somebody else. And if they really want to benefit from it, they could go and teach it to someone else as well. But that's what I'm going to encourage you to do through all of the videos, is to not only listen to the content and maybe ask questions in the group or send me an email, but also to teach it to someone else so you really maximize your learning. So I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video next week. And we'll be encouraging you to teach these concepts to others. And I'll give a few pointers each week on how you might like to do that.